Hello everyone, I'm really happy to share my thoughts on the role of motivation and attitude in language teaching and learning. I divided my presentation into three parts. The first one taps on the role of motivation. Second taps on the characteristic of attitude. Third one, teaching taps on motivation and learning attitude. Now let's look at the types of motivation. Let's think about the question, what is motivation? Motivation is a psychological quality that leads people to achieve goals. Motivation is a desire to achieve a goal combined with energy to work towards that goal. There are some ideas put forward by other scholars. First one, motivation refers to the choices people make as to what experience or goals they will approach or avoid and the degree of effort they will exert in this respect. Keller, 1983. Next one, the Langman Dictionary of Language Teaching and Applied Linguistics defined motivation as the factors that determine a person's desire to do something. Richard, 1992. The last one, motivation may be construed as a state of cognitive and emotional arousal, which leads to the conscious decision to act and which gives rise to a period of sustained intellectual and or the physical effort in order to attain a previously set goal. Williams and Borden, 1997. Now let's continue. Let's think about how much do you want to learn learn another language? Why? And how hard are you willing to work for it? As we all know, the motivation plays a role in so much of what we do on the day-to-day basis. Okay, let's think about some examples. Jerry has his eye on the promotion at work, so he puts in extra hours. Next one, Cindy has always dreamed of running a marathon, so she runs a little further each day. People are motivated to put in efforts or make changes for all kinds of reasons in every facet of their life, and that effort often comes with rewards. Jerry's extra hours helped him to develop some new skills. Cindy is the best shape of her life. Okay, but what does this have to do with language? While to make a good progress in language learning, it really helps good reasons for studying a language. Like wanting to learning some more about another culture or obtaining a language certification for work school, as well as the positive attitudes towards a language and culture. But the reasons and attitudes alone are not enough. You also need to put in the work, and at the end of the day, you are the one who need to seek opportunities for learning and practice. Actively study and remember what you've been exposed to and keep your enthusiasm up over time. This is the language learning motivation. The will to start and keep learning a new language. When you look at it that way, it's no surprise that motivated learners tend to be more successful at second language learning. Okay, now, like other individual differences related to the language learning motivation, isn't just one thing that you have and you don't. It's a complex combination of multi-components. Three components you should remember that the language researchers often look at when it comes to motivation: our goals, efforts, and reflection. And we talk about goals and language learning motivation. Okay, what we are really talking about the reasons you are learning a language, the expectations you have for yourself, and what you want to achieve. All of these reflect your values, attitudes, and beliefs about language learning and the target language community. Now, next, I would like to turn to the types of the motivation. There are the two types: integrative motivation, instrumental motivation. It is thought that students who are most successful in now it is thought that the students most successful when learning a target language are those who like the people that speak the language, admire the culture, and have the desire to become the familiar with or even integrate into the society in which the language is used. From 1978, this form of motivation is known as integrative motivation. Now let's look at the instrumental motivation. In contrast to the integrative motivation, is the form of motivation refers to as the instrumental motivation. This is generally characterized by the desire to obtain something practical or concrete from the study of the second language. Hudson 2000. With the instrumental motivation, the purpose of the language acquisition is more utilitarian, such as the meeting the requirement for school or university graduation, applying for a job, requesting higher pay based on the language ability, reading technical materials, translation work, or the achieving higher social status. Okay, but a higher level integrative orientation, which is often classified as extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. Okay, let's look at the two types of motivation. Now, first one, intrinsic motivation refers to the reason why we perform certain activities for inherent satisfaction or pleasure. You may say performing one of these activities in reinforcing in and of itself. Brown 2007. Extrinsic motivation refers to our tendency to perform the activity for activity for non-external rewards, whether they will be tangible, for example, money, or psychological, for example, praise in nature. Okay, next. Now let's look at the intrinsic way as extrinsic motivation. Why we do what we do. Now let's look at the intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic means because of the interest and enjoyment in the task itself, such as enjoyment, purpose, growth, curiosity, passion, self-expression, and fun. Extrinsic because of the outcome that will result by doing the task, such as the promotion, pay raises, bonuses, benefits, prizes, winning, and perks. Okay, let's look at the next part, the role of the motivation. Motivation, why is motivation so important? Motivation is generally considered to be one of the primary causes of success and failure in second language learning, Richard and Skis, 2022. Next, helping our students remain motivated is as important as teaching vocabulary and grammar. This is because highly motivated students often reach the higher level of fluency than less motivated students. Okay, now let's look at the roles of the motivation in language learning. The first one, motivation directs behavior toward particular goals, such as the language learning. Next, motivation leads to increased effort and energy. Next, motivation increases initiation and the persistence in language learning. Motivation affects cognitive progresses. Motivation determines what consequences are reinforcing and punishing. Motivation often enhances performance. Okay, all these the roles of the motivation in language learning. Okay, now how to increase motivation in language learning? The first one, how? Recognize the complexity of motivation. Be aware of both initiating and sustaining motivation. Develop internal beliefs. Help to move towards the mastery-oriented style. Continue. Enhance intrinsic motivation. Build up a supporting learning environment. Involve learners in language learning goal. The last two, recognize people as individuals. Give feedback that is informational. Okay. Now, how we promoted motivation? Now, let's look at the first one, citing the good examples with your own behavior. Be prepared for classes. Be professional. Learn a second language yourself. Second one, create a pleasant, relaxed atmosphere in the classroom. Have an inviting study atmosphere. Remove clutter and messy. Encourage fairness and equality. Third one, present the tasks properly. Be organized. Know what you are going to do and how you are going to do. The next one, develop a good relationship with the learners. Treat each student as a person. Care, have empathy and compassion. Set boundaries. Next one, increase the learner's linguistic self-confidence. Find ways to show your students that they can use the language effectively. Praise the students' efforts. The next one, make the language classes interesting. Vary the medium of input. Vary the activities. Be interested in the students. Give your students a voice in selecting materials and activities, etc. Okay, next. Okay, the next one, promote learner autonomy, encourage discovery and language self-reflection. Encourage ownership and empowerment. Next, personalize the learning process. Try as much as possible to collaborate with your students. During the learning process, highlight how tasks might match the need of the students, etc. The next one, increase learners' goals-orientedness. Understand that merely citing goals is not enough. You need to work with your students to self-action plan. Remind your students to keep their eye on the prize. The last one is familiarize learners with the Tajik language culture. Many students are interested in the Tajik culture, so make sure you do not neglect the teaching of culture. Okay, let's come to the conclusion. Now, first, motivation is the willingness to start and keep learning a new language. Next one, motivation is primarily made up of goals and efforts and reflection. The third one, motivation can end yearly does change over time. The last one, the motivation really comes down to finding learning experience that works for you. Okay, now motivation, okay, so the positive learning environment, okay, do well to all the students. Okay, this is the first part. Next, I will talk about, let's look at the specific definition of the attitude. The first one, what is attitude? Gardner proposed that attitude is an evaluative reaction to some referent or attitude object, inferred on the basis the individual's belief or opinions about the referent. An attitude is a relatively enduring organization of beliefs around an object or a situation, predisposing one to respond in some preferential manner. Smith, 1971. Okay, now I will introduce some types for attitude. The first one, the positive attitude, negative attitude, neutral attitude, and second attitude. Okay, I will explain it in detail. Sorry. Now the first one, the positive attitude. We students must have, or we teachers or students must have the positive attitude. Okay, this organizes a person's behavior as it keeps your work moving and progressing, which means keeping a positive mindset gives many benefits in any condition. The best way to have the positive mindset is to avoid nausea and start believing in yourself with a list of attitudes, such as confidence, happiness, sincerity, and determination to follow. Next one, the negative attitude. We must stop the negative attitude. Now, negative attitude is necessarily to avoid for everyone. It only gives you a result of being a failure and start to compare yourselves with others. Neutral attitude. In such a source of attitude, there is no hope and no doubt. It is all neutral. People become lazy and often unemotional and do not care much for anything. They just go with the flow. Okay, the last one. This is the worst attitude that can destroy every image of positive thinking. It is very destructive because it is deep rooted in one's personality. So it becomes difficult to handle. Second attitude is described as the most dangerous one because it includes negativity more than positivity in person's mindset. That is why a person needs to change the mindset from second to positive for their personality. Okay, now let's move on to the characters of the attitude. The first one, attitudes are predispositions of purpose, interest or opinion of the people to assess some objects in the favorable or an unfavorable manner. Next one, the attitude are difficult from value. Value are the ideal, whereas attitudes are narrow. They are our feeling. Third one, attitudes are evaluative statement, either favorable or unfavorable concerning the objects, people, or events. The fourth one, attitudes influence human behavior. Pay more attention to this. Positive attitudes toward a thing will influence human behavior towards the thing favorably and vice versa. It refers to the strength of effective component. For example, we may dislike an individual, but the extent of our disliking would determine the intensity of the attitudes towards the person. Okay, the next one, attitude have intensity. Intensity. Okay, now let's look at the first one. Now, okay, the last one is attitude are learned. Okay, attitude is not inborn phenomenon. Attitude are learned through the social interaction and experience. Okay, all these the characters about the attitude. Okay, let's look at the next one. How attitude governs our state of mankind. Individual believes their basic abilities, their intelligence, their talents are just fixed traits. A fixed mindset prevents you from feeling in the short run, but in the long run, it hinders your ability to learn, grow, and develop new skills. Carol Derrick, Mindset 2007. Now, how to cultivate the students' a growth mindset in learning? Professor Derrick determined the view that you adopt of yourself profoundly affects the way you lead your life. Okay? Now, this belief about ourselves often marks the differences between our willingness to the persistence and strive for the success through the innovation and creativity. Or to accept our level of the achievements depends on who we are and how we are made up. The terms for these two ways of thinking are growth mindset and fixed mindset. Okay. Now, a fixed mindset believes your quality are set in stone. You are who you are, and characteristics such as intelligence and creativity are fixed traits, rather than something that can be developed. Alternatively, a growth mindset is believed that our personal traits can be cultivated through efforts, and we can grow and change through our varying experience or varied experience. In other words, we can learn and become better at we can learn and become better. Okay, let's look at the next part. Importance of attitude. Achievement in a target language relies not only on intellectual capacity, but also on the learner's attitude towards language, on the language learning. Okay, let's come to the conclusion of this part. Differences between attitude and motivation. Motivation determines what you do. Attitude determines how well you do. It. The next, motivation and attitude serves a crucial role in the context of English learning. Okay, now an attitude is the set of belief and motivation is a reason for doing something. Okay, let's come to the last part, teaching tips on the motivation and the learning attitude. Okay, teaching tips on motivation. Stadwick introduced the concept of any second language learning courses needing to have the strength to carry its own weight by means of rewards that it provides for success. Okay, he also suggested that any second language learning course can provide 5 types of reward to encourage learner motivation and success. Okay, let's look at the teaching tips on the motivation. 5 types of reward the strength to carry its own weight. Okay, now let's look at the first one. look at the second language. He suggests that course 5 types. Now let's the first one at syllabus level, syllabus level and at lesson level. Now first at the syllabus level is relevant, is complete, is authentic. Now let's come into in detail. The content of syllabus is seen by the learners to be relevant to their reasons for learning the language, the second language. Is complete, includes all the language necessary for the learners to achieve their goals in the second language. Is authentic. The materials used are and can be seen to be linguistically and culturally authentic. At the lesson level, satisfying and useful. First one, satisfying, so that they leave the classroom each time feeling that they have benefited from being there. Useful, so that they can leave the classroom and use what they have learned immediately. It's very good. Okay, now let's look at some instructors' role. The first one, stimulate and maintain students' language learning motivation. The second one, develop a sense of self-efficacy. It is undeniable that the role of the teacher is of great significance to stimulate and maintain students' foreign language learning motivation, and teachers are more concerned about the motivating students' learning style. Okay, next one. External factors such as the teaching resources, learning tasks, and course design contribute to improve students' self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is the key factor for the students to achieve success. Okay, now let's continue. Now, the teacher should emphasize that aptitude and effort are the most important factors to reach one's goal. The last one, the learners must rethink their learning behaviors and make efforts to grasp the language skills. Okay, now let's look at the next one. Cultivate students' autonomous learning ability. Now, in this part, Dickinson put forward that autonomous learning was not only the ability to learn independently, but also an attitude. Next one, he explained the attitude is the responsibility for making decisions for one's own learning. The ability referred to decision and reflection for learning process. The next, the mode of the foreign language teaching should be student-centered, and the teacher's role should be changed from the explainer to the enabler. Okay, now let's look at some teaching tips on the learning attitude. Okay, as for the students' learning attitude, there are some teaching methods to be followed. First of all, the teachers should help the students to set up correct learning attitude. The teacher may take some good examples of learning English to let the students be aware of their wrong concept about language learning and help them correct their false idea. Secondly, the students' negative learning attitude have something to do with the teacher's teaching method. A rigid teaching method and boring teaching content usually make the students lose interest in the course. It is necessary for the teacher to change their teaching method and stimulate students' learning interest. The novelty and diverse teaching method is bound to arouse students' learning interest. Finally, it is the teacher's duty to eliminate the students' negative learning experience Students' negative learning attitude result from their setbacks and failures encountered in the learning process. Students are rather frustrated by their unsuccessful learning experience and they may feel inferior to the top students. Okay, in the conclusion, the teacher needed to encourage the students to learn from their poor performance with no criticism or condemn. Besides, the teacher can create a positive and happy classroom atmosphere for the students to ease their nervousness. Okay, thank you for your listening. At last, I prepared 3 questions for you. The first one for us to discuss is what are the primary impetus to initiate the second language learning? What motivation and attitude are and their roles in second language learning? The last one, what's the relationship between the motivation and attitude in second language learning? Okay, so much for this. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your enjoying. Okay, bye bye.